Welcome to our last session. Unfortunately, we're having some technical difficulties with South Africa as far as trying to get a hold of our next speaker. So what we're going to do is actually watch a video, which I think complements with what we're trying to do. This is of Nadine Templer from a little while back. And we are going to go through, because she's going to be recognized as one of the recipients of our Image Bearer Awards or general recognition. And I think some of the things that she shares about in this video really bring to light what we can imitate as image bearers. So this is about a 40-minute video or so, and it's really about the life of Nadine and really what we can take away in terms of being image bearers. So here is the video.
Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so excited today to have on the show with us Nadine Templer. She's going to be sharing some awesome things about her life that I think are going to inspire all of us. So I just have a question just to start out, Miss Nadine. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and also how God brought you into his kingdom?
Okay, well, it's wonderful to be with you, and thank you for inviting me to share. I grew up in France, so I'm French, and I went to school in France, and after I finished my master's degree, I moved to London, and my upbringing was not religious at all. Typical French family. We never went to church, never read the Bible, never talked about God, just very, very secular upbringing. But I studied literature in university and I read a lot of books. And one of the books that I happened to read was the Bible. So I was curious. And, I was 21 years old when I moved to London, and I knew that there was something more to life, but I didn't know what it was. And I certainly had no intention of being a Christian. Religion did not appeal to me at all. But I landed in London. I had my first job there. I was going to be teaching French at London University. And within 10 days of arriving in London, Douglas Jacoby invited me to church. And I went out of curiosity, intellectual curiosity. And, less than 2 months later, I was baptized. So there you go.
That's awesome. I think you speak quite a few languages too, don't you?
Yes, I studied languages in university along with literature. So yes. And then, of course, being on the mission field, we lived in India for a long time. So we speak Hindi fluently. And yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm actually blown away by your passion for social justice. And so I just wanted to know, I think as disciples, my personal conviction is this is what we should all have as a passion.
Amen.
But I think that your passion seems like it's just really big. And I'm just wondering where do you think that comes from?
I think I can definitely credit my upbringing, even though our family never went to church. I remember my parents, especially my dad, always talking about treat everyone kindly, be compassionate. My dad had spent a few years in North Africa. And, he had been around people from different cultures and different backgrounds. And, he was a very compassionate person. And he always used to tell me, if there are kids at school who don't have lunch, share your lunch. If you see someone from a different race, treat them kindly. So that was kind of drilled into my head from being a young child. And we did not grow up rich. My dad was a car mechanic. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So we were very working class and very simple. We had led a very simple life. My dad pushed us to get a good education, though. He believed in that. So I think my upbringing had a lot to do with it. I also think that, and I think that's the biggest thing, when I started reading the Bible, I'd never read it before. I'd never gone to church. So it was all new and fresh. So the Jesus I met was a Jesus who served people, who healed the sick, who helped the poor people, who was friendly to people from different backgrounds. I did not have any preconceptions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't come to the Bible, I didn't get baptized with preconceived ideas. It was all new and fresh. And I think when people read the Bible that way, it's very, very obvious that social justice, biblical justice, is part of the gospel. It's part of being a Christian.
Yeah, actually, to me, what you're sharing kind of makes me think about how I think someone once said, we're going to be surprised one day someone's going to pick up a Bible and just start doing what it says. You know, I think of you in so many ways that way, and that's what we're going after as disciples. So I know that you've been self-supporting, I think, for about 10 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess if you maybe just share what your job is currently. I know you work with Hope Worldwide. I think your husband is the diplomat, and how that kind of came about.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, after spending many years in full-time ministry, and a lot of our time was spent in South Asia, you know, South Asia had local leadership, you know, wonderful brothers and sisters who were totally able to run the churches and Hope Worldwide. And so it was time for us to move on. And, you know, we also had, you know, children that were growing up, going to college, and that became more expensive. And so we were faced with a decision, either come back to I wouldn't say come back because I'd never lived in the US, but either move to the US and take up a ministry job in the US, or stay on the mission field. But that meant we had to become self-supported. So my husband decided then, with the encouragement from some other, you know, there was a brother living in New Delhi at the time, Andy Yateman, who encouraged my husband to maybe consider the Foreign Service. So my husband took the exam, passed with flying colors, which, you know, we were not surprised by, and then started working for the State Department. And so, yes, he is a diplomat now, and I am working for Hope Worldwide. So, you know, we're self-supported missionaries, but obviously we have jobs. So I work for Hope Worldwide, you know, overseeing all of the volunteer corps and youth corps around the world. And Mark is posted to various embassies around the world for a few years at a time, which allows us to request certain postings where we know the church may need some help or some support. So that's why we're moving to Kathmandu. We have wonderful friends there. The church is amazing. But, you know, they could do with some support and some training. And so we're going to go there, spend a few years there, and I'll keep doing my job that I'm doing now because I can do it from anywhere. But in the meantime, you know, try and be a support to the wonderful group of disciples there.
Okay. I think I've seen somewhere that you're moving in July to Kathmandu, correct?
Well, prayerfully.
God willing. Yeah.
God willing.
Right. So what do you love about Kathmandu?
It's my favorite place in the whole world. It is. I mean, there are many places I love. I've spent a lot of time in the Philippines, in Zambia, Kenya, you know, but we spend most of our adult life in India.
Have you been to Malawi?
I haven't been to Malawi, no.
Oh, they just bought a Zambia. That's where I was born.
Yeah. So I've been to Botswana, but not Malawi. But, you know, we spend most of our adult life in India, and Kathmandu is very similar, except that the needs are even greater. Okay. It's materially even poorer, but it's a beautiful country. The mountains are amazing. The people are very, very welcoming. I think, you know, Nepal is India, but even more kind of radical. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they're mountain people, they're resilient people, they're courageous people. And yeah, I just love it there. I feel at home when I'm there.
Okay. How do you like the food?
I love the food. It's like Indian food, but maybe a bit healthier.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, they eat a lot of vegetables. It's a Hindu culture, so a lot of people are vegetarian. Yeah, no, it's wonderful. It's great. And it's not as hot as India, so that's kind of nice too.
So what does your family think? Just an odd question. What does your family think? Maybe they accept it, but what do they think initially while you're moving and doing this in your foreign countries? And
Well, I was always, so before I was a Christian, I was a wild teenager. So I always did things to upset my parents. So when I became a Christian, they were very relieved. So whatever I did after becoming a Christian, even though sometimes it was a little bit crazy, in comparison to the way I was before I was a Christian, it's still a lot better. No, my family have been incredibly supportive. It's been hard because I've been far away. I gave birth to my kids in India. They couldn't be with me. And so, but they've been really great. And, the amazing thing is that my whole family became Christians after I was baptized.
Oh, okay.
So, my parents have been very supportive, but that's also because, they were disciples, and my brother is a leader in the church as well. And, so no, they've been really understanding. And, the irony is now my kids are doing the same thing to me. I have a daughter in Australia. I have, they're all over the place. So
I think you have a son, Luke, too, right?
Yeah, I have a son, Luke, is in Seattle. I have a daughter in Baltimore. I have a daughter at college in Arizona. And then the youngest one is coming with us to Nepal. So yeah, I mean, my kids were raised that way. We always moved. We don't own a home. We don't own any furniture. We just kind of, pack our suitcases and some boxes and go to the next place. So they're used to that. That's their life too. So, getting on an airplane is no big deal because that's what they've always done. So they've had an unusual life, but, we kind of roll with it.
That's awesome. What would you say are some of your most memorable experiences as a disciple? I know you've lived in Africa, Asia, up to the US now.
Oh my goodness. I mean, there's the really heartwarming stories of seeing people become Christians and change. And, there's the stories of when we first went to India and we didn't know anything and we had no idea about the culture and anything. But one of my husband's convictions is that when you move to a place, you learn the language and you live like the people and you become like one of them. And in doing that, obviously, that we saw a lot of pain, we saw a lot of suffering. But I remember one of the most vivid memories for me is when we moved to India and we stayed in this little hotel the first few days we were there when we went on the mission team. And outside the hotel, there was a man who sold bananas. And he had a little wooden cart. And his son was with him. He had a little boy who was probably 3 or 4 years old, very severely physically handicapped. I think this little boy must have had polio. Mm-hmm. And so he couldn't walk. His legs were very thin and deformed. But this man loved his little boy. It was so obvious. But the little boy sat on the cart every day, all day, didn't have any clothes on. And I mean, they were so close, the dad and the son, mm-hmm. but they literally had nothing. Materially, they had nothing. And, one of the sisters on the mission team went and bought a little outfit for the little boy. And, those things really are ingrained in my mind, and whenever I think about complaining or, my life is not everything that I want it to be, those are the people I remember, mm-hmm. So that's one memory. There's also, the lessons we've learned along the way, the way that, when the church went through, really challenging time in 2003, mm-hmm. how, Mark and I were leaders, we were leading the London church at the time. And it was very humbling to hear people's stories and to, really repent mm-hmm. as leaders of the hurt and the harm and, the things that we had done or the things we had been, complicit with, and to be able to really change, mm-hmm. And I think now that we're going through this time, where, Black people in America are feeling, and rightfully so, oppressed and discriminated against. I think having gone through times like that in the past, it's made it a little bit easier to be humble this time around, and to listen, to repent, to apologize, not to be defensive, because we've been through something like this before. So those are really important times as well, in our Christian life. It's the lessons learned, and how as disciples and as leaders, we really have to listen. We have to be approachable and vulnerable. And, there's a sister from London who called me today, about something that I had done like in 1991. And, it was so healing to be able to talk. So anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, I think you've been a disciple maybe 37 years. I'm not sure.
Yes, 37. Yeah.
37. Okay.
Yeah.
So just as a random question, I guess, to a degree, how do you keep your heart soft? What would be some ways you try to keep your heart soft through the years?
Well, my husband always says, stay in the Gospels, read about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. And another one of my, mentors, someone I've looked up to, Lisa Johnson, she always used to say that, and she still says that. It's all about Jesus. And so I think if we stay in the Gospels, that really helps, because you see the life that we're supposed to live. And then all we have to do is try our best to imitate. I think the other thing too, as I was sharing earlier, when I was baptized, I really, really felt a sense of redemption, forgiveness. I cried at my baptism. People were wondering why, but, I felt so redeemed, and that feeling is still with me. I always share that, but I really mean it. It feels like I was baptized yesterday. That sense of, I can't believe that I'm a Christian. I had no idea about Christianity. I had no intention, but I went to church, and the first sermon I heard just pierced my heart. And I went and I bought a Bible that day, and I read it, and I fell in love with Jesus, and that was it. So, and I think staying connected, I think going to places like India, like Zambia, staying connected with the reality of life, in a place like the US, we live in a bubble in so many ways. True. It's not, we don't live like the rest of the world.
Right.
And so staying connected to reality, when I travel and I live in those countries, the Bible comes alive, and so that, I think, also has really helped.
So I guess for like myself, I want to stay connected. I can't necessarily go to Zambia or Nepal. Would it be like going to hospitals you'd recommend, or
serve your community and surround yourself with people who are not like you. I think a lot of us live in our neighborhoods. We live a comfortable life, and we don't see how people even in this country live.
Right.
Even the stories we're hearing now from Black people, some people are totally shocked. And yes, right. Of course, it is shocking, but if we make an effort to go to different neighborhoods, and someone said one time, I don't remember who, but said, who is in your kitchen? Like, who do you invite to your kitchen? Right. Who sits at your table? That's a good test, because very often it's people who are like us, people who look like us, people who speak like us. We don't naturally reach out to people who are different from us. And we live here in Northern Virginia, which is the suburbs of Washington, D.C. It's a very, very nice. It's one of the wealthiest, I think these are the wealthiest counties in the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
And you take the metro and you go to downtown DC, and it's a totally different world. And people are experiencing homelessness. But how many of us actually even go there?
Right.
And how do we mix, so I think surrounding ourselves with people who come from a different background, and just, we all know when we go to a homeless shelter, we realize, these are people just like us. It could be me.
Right.
It's very easy to fall into homelessness in this country. So, or people who are experiencing, drug addiction, or, just surrounding ourselves with people who are different and reaching out and trying to understand.
Okay. So obviously I know you work for Hope Worldwide, and we definitely appreciate that. So what are some of the things that Hope Worldwide is working on right now with COVID-19 and other efforts outside of COVID-19? You can just share briefly.
Yes. And so COVID-19 has been a big deal, obviously. It came very fast, very quickly. We had to act very quickly. Fortunately, because we work so closely with the ICOC, we were able to partner with the churches, and churches in, minority world countries, what used to be called the developed or first world. Now it's called the minority world, because we are the minority. So those countries that have more resources, very quickly the churches organized collections. We had a campaign called Loaves and Fishes, and people, collected money, and we established a committee. And, I'm on that committee along with some other brothers and sisters in the leadership. And, every week we receive requests from different countries around the world, from countries in Africa, in Asia, Eastern Europe, Central and South America. People are hurting right now, not just because of the virus itself, but because they've lost their jobs. So they cannot work. And if they cannot work, they cannot eat. And
right.
So, we've been able every week to send funds around the world, and we've collected over $2 million, and we've sent, already a good amount of that. We have more that we need to send, and we will send, because this is not over. So that's been a big focus. So, and outside of that, obviously, we have all of our signature programs, the volunteer corps, the community service brigades, which this year right now are on hold because of COVID. But, we have the early childhood education programs that Dr. Mark Aguirre has inspired out of South Africa, but those are all over the world.
Can you explain what is that exactly? What's that?
So the early childhood development program. So Dr. Aguirre, did that with Dr. Ottenweller in South Africa, where they realized that, what's really important is to take care of the children when they're young.
Right.
Before they even start school, make sure they're healthy, that they're well taken care of, and mentoring the families, taking care of the mothers and the fathers, and, making sure that the child has a good start in life. If the child has a good start in life, then they're well set up. Very often children are already in a bad situation before they even go to school, and it affects them in many ways, health-wise, mentally, and so on. So these are very successful programs that are spreading all over Africa, but also in other countries. So that's, one program that has been very successful. There are lots of different programs around the world, but those are some of the things that, we've been doing. Disaster relief is also a big part of what Hope Worldwide does. And there's been a lot, as we know. And this year, unfortunately, we're expecting a very intense hurricane season.
Right.
So hurricanes in North America, typhoons in Asia, cyclones in South Asia, earthquakes whenever they happen. So Hope has a very quick response team, that intervenes very quickly. We have a disaster fund ready for when disasters happen. It used to be that a disaster would happen and then we would, scramble for funds and then send the money. Now we have a fund that is ready to go, and then we replenish it, obviously, by different appeals.
Okay. So what are some ways that disciples can get involved? I think I saw something in Tucson, Arizona. They were making masks. I think they made 20,000 masks.
I know.
I know that Boston Church has a food pantry. What are some other ways that you can think of that disciples can get involved?
So in most places in the US, there is a Hope chapter in the local congregation. So that's really the first step, is just get involved with your local Hope chapter. Yeah. They have programs going on already. And if there is not a chapter, then reach out to us, because, hey, why not start one? Mm-hmm. So, yes. And then, we have programs for families, for young people. We have the Hope Worldwide Scouts for children mm-hmm. and young. And then we have the National Youth Advisory Council, which is for teenagers and campus students in the US, where they're trained in service leadership, and they run projects. Recently, they did the Sing Hope concert, the Bold for Bucks. That's also another one of their projects.
Actually, can we stop you right there real quick? So I know you have shaved your head, and I think we talked a little bit earlier that Steve Johnson also had shaved his. Can you share just briefly about the Bold for Bucks?
Yes, so it's all part of the Loaves and Fishes COVID-19 campaign, but these are sub projects that young people started. So, with COVID, they couldn't go out and do projects outside. And so, teenagers decided, we'll put on a concert and raise money. And then, it became this huge thing. And the Sing Hope concert raised $120-something thousand. That's awesome. This was all done by young people. And then the Bold for Bucks, it was a young man from Cincinnati, Mitchell Nee. He said, well, okay, I'm going to do this fundraiser. We're going to, shave our heads. And every time somebody shaves their head, every time we reach $500 more, a new person shaves their head. And his goal originally, I think, was to maybe collect $5,000, but then it grew bigger and bigger. And then I saw it and I was like, I want to support the kids. And so I did it, and they gave me a benchmark of $20,000, and then more church leaders got involved, more leaders, and then Steve Johnson came in at the end to support it. So we've raised, I think, around $70,000, and but this is all done by young people, and then along with the volunteer corps, we have another leadership program, which is the Global Service Internship, where we train campus students. It's a 2-year internship while they're in college, and we train them to lead the volunteer corps and the youth corps. So there are opportunities for young people. We also now have a lot more empty nesters getting involved and serving. There's lots of leadership opportunities for singles in Hope Worldwide. Some of the chapters are run by singles. So there are a lot of ways to get involved. Mm-hmm.
Okay, going to change subjects a little bit. So I know, obviously, with the passing of George Floyd, I noticed on Facebook you had posted some of the books that you're reading and just some change of heart that you've kind of gone through. Mm-hmm. Can you share a little bit about that and what you're learning and so forth?
Yes, I think, for me, I've never lived in the US. I came here 3 years ago, but, I've lived in places around the world where it may not be a racial issue with Black people, but it will be something else. Like in India, they have the caste system and they have the outcasts, the people who are, they call them the untouchables. And I know growing up in France, we have a large population of immigrants from North Africa, and they're very discriminated against. And I think, but the issue of racism in the US is really, really shocking in many ways. I remember when I moved here 3 years ago, I noticed how segregated this country was. And I actually commented on it to my friends. I said, things are really segregated. People live in white neighborhoods and black neighborhoods. And there doesn't seem, I lived in London for a long time as well. And London, of course, has racism too, but people are a lot closer to one another. Then it's not as segregated. So being here, I did notice it and I commented on it, and I did ask at some point, why don't we talk about this in church? But I left it, and now seeing the videos and talking to people and hearing their experiences, it's really heartbreaking. And I think for us as the white people, we have not just instituted this system, but we have, even the ones of us who see ourselves as more progressive, we're still part of the problem, because I have not said enough. I have not spoken up enough. And the thing that is becoming very obvious is that unless the white people are part of the solution, we will remain part of the problem. And we have to be involved. We have to help out. We have to fix this. This is not, I think Black people have spoken up. They've spoken up a lot. They've shown their indignation, their anger, their hurt. Now it's time for the white people to get on board and help turn this around. We don't have a choice. This has got to be it. This is it. Many times in the past, Black people have protested and they've had allies, amongst white people, like in the civil rights movements. But this feels, I hope, I pray, a little different. I went on a protest last week and it was in my area, which is pretty white, but it was pretty much all white people and suburban families, families with their children in strollers, people who work down in the government offices. These are people that if they get on board, they can really make a difference.
Right.
So, I feel very passionately about this, as you can imagine, just not because I've lived here a long time, but I've been around injustice in other parts of the world. And so for me, it's all the same thing. It's about privilege and it's about biblical justice and the way Jesus treated people. So anyway.
What are some of the books that you're reading? I know you posted some. Can you share about some you can think of? I
think probably the most impactful book for me has been White Fragility.
Okay.
It's written by a white woman addressing white people. And it's super convicting. And it's especially convicting for people who think that they get it, but they don't, like me. People who see themselves as not racist or progressive or, I have 2 daughters adopted from India. So, I'm one of the good people, or I spent, most of my life on the mission field. So yeah, I'm ahead of some people. But that book really shows that sometimes people like that, like me, can be the worst kind of, we can be in the worst position, because the thing I've learned is that I was not ignorant. I knew that there was racism, there was discrimination. I wasn't blind to it, but I didn't do anything about it. And when I brought it up and people didn't say anything, I left it. And I shouldn't have left it. I should have said, no, let's talk about this. Let's address it. I should have, raised my voice more. So that's been really, really convicting. And the whole idea of white fragility, how we can be so defensive as white people when the topic of racism comes up. Now, I think, it's been very encouraging to see that, people are trying, More and more people are listening. I've seen some people totally change in the last 2 weeks. I mean, people who didn't even want to talk about it are now the biggest advocates.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's been a lot of really great progress.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what's been most convicting to me. And there's a book, White Fragility, but if people don't want to spend the time reading the whole book, she also has some really good talks on YouTube. And Robin DiAngelo is her name. She's a professor in Seattle. She has some really good stuff. So
I'm reading this one too. This is Rediscipling the White Church, and it's a very good book. The whole point is that the church has already been discipled into a certain way of thinking, and now needs to be rediscipled into, the kind of church Jesus wants it to be. That's not this is a white agenda, see it this way kind of a thing. So I think he probably should have chosen a different title, but that's just me.
Yeah.
So yeah, what would be some things you would say to perhaps your white colleagues who are like, I want to see things, how do I begin? I think Right Fragility, probably you'd recommend that to them.
Yeah, that's the first one.
Things? Okay.
And then the books and the podcast by Michael Burns, he is a disciple. And so obviously there are things in the world that we can learn from outside of our church. But I think we have great resources within the church. So I think Michael Burns has written some excellent things. I also think, Gordon Ferguson has done, a lot of good stuff as an older white man.
From the South.
Yeah, exactly. He can speak to, people, he speaks the same language. Right. I know Steve Johnson, through this whole Bald for Bucks, has really been very humble and has asked a lot of questions and has come. I mean, he's shaving his head for the cause. That's a big deal for at our age. It's not something that we do lightly. So I think, and I think, to be honest, I just think we need to be humble. We just need to be humble. We need to listen. And just this is a time for us, the white people, especially the older people, to really be humble. The youth are way more eager to see change. I work with young people a lot, and they're just chomping at the bit, to see things change. So I think we need to listen. I
have a quick question just as we close up before we wrap it up, is how do you, what would you say are the next steps for you in terms of, or if there are next steps in terms of, what are the next steps that you see? Okay, reading the books I think is great, having a change of heart. But I guess I think of you, and I think I'm similar in a sense. I'm like, okay, so I'm getting more, even as an African American myself, I'm learning more myself about my own history and just our shared history. But I'm also like, okay, so what does that look like as far as the next thing that I'm going to do?
Right.
So what are some things you've been thinking, if you've been thinking that way?
Yes, definitely. There is education, but we can't just read books forever. We've got to move, I've heard this said a lot, it's impact. It's not just intention, it's impact. So impact beyond intent. Really acting to see change. So speaking up, and being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations. Even if it means, I've had conversations that didn't go well, but not giving up, especially in the church, we're Christians, we love one another, going back to that person and persevering and being patient and being kind, but not giving up. I think in the past I would drop the subject, whereas now, I'm not going to drop the subject. And there are other issues of injustice that are on my heart. And I'm not going to drop them. I'm going to keep speaking. I'm going to keep, and I think showing up and being engaged, those are, some of the things that I think, just being active, you know, showing up to the protests and then, you know, supporting the people who are making the changes. But I think especially having the conversations one-on-one and not giving up, you know, winning people over one by one, that's something that we can all do.
Right, right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, but I am so encouraged just by your heart and just by your impact that you've had. I wish you'd been to Malawi, but you know, there's still time. There's still time.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just so inspired just by your heart. I know as a young disciple, you know, I wanted to always have like those inspirational role models. And we did definitely have, you know, some of those who were married that were doing great things. And I think for me, you're just an incredible example, yourself, your husband, and your family, of just being on the cutting edge of Christianity, keeping your heart soft, and you know, just fighting for what's right in whatever capacity you have. So I appreciate your service for so many years, and I'm sure you guys are going to do great things in Kathmandu.
Well, pray for us, and thank you so much. You're always reaching out. You're always like the cheerleader, you know. We feel the encouragement, so thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks again for joining us.
Okay, bye-bye.
See, I kept the same jacket just to make sure you guys weren't confused from some years back. Obviously, that video was taken during COVID. You know, so, and I think even with that, the question is, you know, what has changed? What has stayed the same in our lives? If we're connecting the lesson that Laura Barringer did about each one of us being responsible for the culture that we're in, and it's not just up to the leaders. You know, I think Nadine shared that, yes, she you know, claimed some responsibility for not speaking out for different things that she saw. And I think each one of us need to ask ourselves, even, you know, since then, you know, what have we done? You know, how are we in terms of the changes that we've made? Or obviously it starts with our heart, but what has happened, you know, to us since then? So right now we're going to go ahead and take a break until 2:45. At that time, we'll have our panel discussion. And also, Neil will be able to join us. Had a little bit of some issues, difficulties, and so forth. So we do apologize for that. However, we are going to record the video of his session and then get that out to you guys, so you do have that. But when we have our panel discussion, we'll start out actually with Neil. He'll give a summary of the lesson that he had planned on giving. And then we'll have a time for Q&A with the rest of the speakers. Doesn't look like Laura Barringer is going to be with us. She had some things she needed to take care of. But be thinking about the questions you'd like to ask the speakers, and we'll go ahead and cover them at that time. So we'll see you guys at 2:45. Thanks.